When people think of prehistoric humans, the image that often comes to mind is one of wild-haired brutes, club in hand, growling in the shadows of a cave, dragging their wives by the hair, tearing raw meat with their teeth. This crude stereotype has lingered for centuries, becoming a symbol of ignorance and savagery, a supposed time before the light of civilization dawned. But modern archaeology, anthropology, and science have begun peeling away those layers of prejudice and misconception. The truth about our distant ancestors could not be more different from those old caricatures. The men and women of the Paleolithic era, from Homo habilis and Homo erectus to Neanderthals, Denisovans, and early Homo sapiens, were not primitive. They were survivors, thinkers, creators, and strategists. They didn't just endure their environment, they adapted to it with extraordinary ingenuity. They crafted tools with refined, sharpened edges. They balanced wooden spears with aerodynamic precision, designed for distance and accuracy. Deep within caves, they painted not merely to record events, but to express abstract thoughts, spiritual ideas, and cultural memory. Modern humans often underestimate just how fragile we would be in a truly wild, untamed world. Drop someone today, with a university degree, fluent in multiple languages, iPhone in hand, into an Ice Age wilderness, and within days they would starve, dehydrate, or fall prey to predators. Yet our ancestors survived relentless winters, megafauna, natural disasters, and endless migrations across thousands of kilometers of unforgiving terrain. They healed wounds with plants, treated pain with herbs and fungi, raised children, and passed down knowledge generation by generation. It wasn't savagery, it was a profound mastery of survival. If the story of humanity was a 100-page book, the chapter we're living in now would be just the final page. All the history we typically learn, from ancient Egypt and the Roman Empire to the Renaissance, the Industrial Revolution, and the digital age, makes up less than 1% of our story. The remaining 99% belongs to the Paleolithic era, stretching from 2.6 million years ago to around 12,000 years ago. It was during this vast span of time, long before cities, governments, or written records, that humanity discovered fire, developed language, crafted tools, domesticated animals, and built the spiritual and cultural foundations of the world we live in today. These were not empty centuries of aimless wandering. Homo habilis, the handyman, began shaping stone tools more than 2 million years ago. Homo erectus stood upright and walked vast distances. The Neanderthals built shelters from stone and bone, while the Denisovans roamed the highlands of Asia. Eventually, Homo sapiens emerged, the species that would endure and spread across the globe, inheriting and refining the wisdom of those who came before. A typical day in the life of a Paleolithic human was neither chaotic nor disorganized. There were no calendars, no deadlines, no clocks. But every sunrise marked the beginning of a race against death, where one mistake, a missed step, an unseen predator, a sudden storm, could mean the end. Mornings began not with alarms, but with the sounds of wind rustling through animal hide shelters, the crackle of glowing embers, and the heavy scent of smoke lingering in fur and hair. The first awake would carefully stir the coals of the night's fire, a precious lifeline that must never be allowed to go out. Fire provided warmth, light, protection from predators, and a means to cook food. It was survival in its purest form. Archaeologists have uncovered ancient hearths at sites like Terra Amata in France, which were carefully maintained over many years, ringed with ash, charcoal, and bones. After tending the fire came the essential task of fetching water. Someone would walk to the nearest stream, pool, or spring, carrying water back in animal bladders, hollowed gourds, or hide pouches. Others would inspect traps laid overnight for small game, while a few sharpened stone blades, repaired spears, and prepared for the day's hunt. There were no shouted orders, no formal hierarchy. Everyone knew their role because survival demanded it. Hunting, contrary to popular myth, was not a wild, frenzied chase of instinct-driven men waving clubs. It was a deadly art form built on observation, patience, and intergenerational wisdom. At Boxgrove in England, a horse shoulder blade was found pierced by a spear point in a perfectly placed, instantly fatal wound, not a desperate attack, but a calculated strike after hours of tracking and waiting. At Schöningen in Germany, nearly 300,000-year-old spears were discovered, crafted from spruce trunks, polished and balanced for precision like modern javelins. By around 30,000 years ago, spear throwers, simple lever tools, doubled the throwing range and force of a spear. By 20,000 years ago, bows and arrows appeared, allowing for safer, long-distance hunting. Still, no matter how advanced the weapon, hunting was a gamble. A missed throw meant hunger. An injury could mean death. That's why gathering plant food, nuts, roots, fruits, and seeds, formed the backbone of daily survival. Plants, unlike game animals, return seasonally and reliably. Contrary to childhood myths about cavemen, most prehistoric humans didn't live permanently in caves. Caves were occasional shelters, used during storms or cold winters. Most of the time, they built homes wherever the land allowed. At Mazyrik in Ukraine, circular dwellings made of mammoth bones and animal hides were constructed over 15,000 years ago. At Terra Amida, large wooden huts stretched up to 15 meters in length, with organized living spaces, cooking by the fire, sleeping away from smoke, tool-making areas, and dedicated waste disposal zones. Their homes were orderly, maintained, and cleaned. Paleolithic people didn't live in squalor. They made their homes wherever they settled and built functioning communities. And these communities were not isolated. Archaeological finds show clear evidence of long-distance trade and exchange networks. Seashells from coastal regions have been discovered hundreds of kilometers inland. Obsidian from modern-day Turkey has been found in Central Europe. Beads, ochre pigments, animal bones, and tools from distant sources tell us that prehistoric people traveled, traded, and exchanged gifts across vast territories. Not with coins or contracts, but through trust, reciprocity, and shared memory. Within their groups, they shared food communally, with no one left hungry if another had plenty. Art and symbolic thinking blossomed in these communities. In Blombos Cave in South Africa, 100,000-year-old ochre-stained shells and smoothed pigment stones hint at body decoration, storytelling, and ritual. A 43,000-year-old bone flute from Germany still produces hauntingly familiar music today. And in the deep recesses of caves like Lascaux and Altamira, humans painted images of animals, abstract patterns, and symbols, not as hunting instructions, but as spiritual rites, metaphors, and shared myths. Care and compassion were equally vital to these societies. In Shanidar Cave in Iraq, archaeologists uncovered the skeleton of a Neanderthal man who had lost his right arm, was crippled in his left leg, blind in one eye, and with a deformed skull, and yet lived to around 40, an advanced age for his time. His survival would have been impossible without constant care from his community, who fed him, cleaned him, protected him, and brought him along during migrations. Not because he was useful in the hunt, but because he was one of them. Paleolithic people didn't abandon the weak. They valued the old and the injured for their wisdom, memory, and experience. They also practiced medicine. On ancient teeth and bones, traces of medicinal herbs, fungi, and the active ingredients of modern painkillers like salicylic acid, from willow bark, have been found. They used leaves to staunch wounds, clay to set broken bones, and ash to disinfect injuries. They had no hospitals, but they had knowledge, hard-won through experience and passed down with care. Today, we live in a world of electric light, smartphones, artificial food, and concrete cities. Yet, we also live in an age of environmental crises, anxiety, social disconnection, and spiritual unease. In chasing progress, we have forgotten the wisdom of the past. Paleolithic people didn't have technology, but they lived sustainably. They knew how to share, how to honor their dead, how to be grateful for a successful hunt. They took only what they needed. They left no plastic, no polluted rivers, no deforested hills. Perhaps we don't need to return to the Stone Age. But we should remember how humans once lived, in harmony with nature, with each other, and with themselves. Not as savages, but as ingenious survivors, storytellers, healers, and builders of the earliest foundations of civilization. In our DNA, in our oldest memories, in our ancestral dreams, we still carry their fire.